On the evening of November 3, 1996, a Mercedes 600 SEL crashed near the town of Sousse-sur-Luc in Balıkesir province, a routine traffic fatality until the passenger list surfaced. A deputy police chief, a fugitive hitman wanted by Interpol, a sitting member of parliament. Inside the wreckage, weapons, cash, and 6 forged identity documents. One collision had placed the Turkish state, its security apparatus, and its criminal underworld in the same vehicle. The question was never about the crash. It was about who put them there. The physical record of the collision begins at approximately 7:25 p.m. local time on November 3, 1996. A black Mercedes 600 SEL bearing the license plate 06AC600 was traveling north on the Balıkesir to Bursa highway. The vehicle was moving through the Sousse-sur-Luc district in Balıkesir province. Forensic investigators later calculated its pre-impact speed at roughly 180 kilometers per hour. This specific vehicle, a luxury model owned by one of the passengers, would eventually serve as the visual shorthand for the entire case. As the Mercedes passed the Catalkavas gas station, a tractor-trailer with the license plate 20RC721, operated by Hasan Göke, pulled onto the highway. The Mercedes struck the rear left side of the truck at a shallow angle. The kinetic energy of the impact was immense. It sheared off the front bumper, grille, and engine block of the sedan while displacing the truck's rear axle forward by several meters. The deceleration forces proved fatal for 3 of the 4 occupants inside the cabin. The driver was Hüseyin Kokadag, the director of the police school in Kusadasi. Beside him sat Abdullah Katli, a fugitive wanted internationally by Interpol. In the rear of the vehicle sat Gonca Us, a former model and Katli's companion. These 3 occupants died instantly from massive cranial trauma and blood loss. The final passenger, Sadat Bukak, a member of parliament and tribal leader, survived. Responders pulled him from the crumpled passenger compartment with a fractured skull and severe leg injuries. Initially, local authorities treated the incident as a severe but routine highway accident. They focused on Gökçe, the truck driver, who was later convicted of negligence and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Yet the process of verifying the casualties quickly stalled. The names on the recovered identification papers did not match the faces of the victims, and the crash scene quickly ceased to appear ordinary. The physical inventory of the Mercedes 600 SEL transformed the highway collision into an active investigation. Inside the crushed cabin and trunk, responders and investigators recovered a cache of equipment that did not match the profile of civilian travelers. They found approximately $100,000 in mixed currencies, including US dollars, German marks, and Swiss francs. Alongside the currencies sat a significant collection of weapons, multiple handguns, submachine guns, and silencers. Among the ammunition were 100 rounds of 5.56 mm cartridges. Forensic logs noted that these casings bore the stamp of the General Directorate of Security in Ankara, indicating they originated from state police stockpiles. The identification papers recovered from the bodies revealed further irregularities. The man who died in the front passenger seat carried credentials identifying him as Mehmet Özbey. A check of the photograph, however, revealed the face of Abdullah Katli, an internationally wanted fugitive. The forged papers included a national identity card, a driver's license, and a special weapon permit. These documents reportedly bore the personal signature of Interior Minister Mehmet Agar. The female passenger, Gonca Us, also carried falsified documents under the name Melahat Özbey. When details of this inventory leaked to the domestic press, the focus of public attention shifted. Newspapers published the list of recovered items, forcing a rapid re-examination of the passenger list. The coexistence of state-issued ammunition, a government-signed weapon permit, and an international fugitive in a vehicle driven by a senior police chief suggested an organized relationship. For the public, the evidence did not merely hint at corruption, it provided a physical record of coordination. The items placed specific, undeniable details onto the public record. While the government initially maintained that the cargo did not prove systematic state collusion, the recovered objects permanently separated the official narrative of a simple traffic accident from the visible reality of the wreckage. In the mid-1990s, Turkey operated under a severe security climate, dominated by the ongoing armed conflict between the state and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. This war, fought largely in the country's southeastern provinces, led the state to employ unconventional counterinsurgency tactics. Official security policies increasingly relied on paramilitary groups, including the state-sanctioned village guard. These guards, drawn from local tribes, were armed and funded by the government to secure rural areas against rebel forces. This strategy created a parallel security infrastructure. Over time, the lines between official military operations and private paramilitary enforcement began to blur. In this environment, public debates frequently focused on the expansion of extraordinary state powers. Citing national security, various branches of the police, military, and intelligence agencies operated with minimal civilian oversight. This lack of transparency fostered an atmosphere of deep secrecy. Reports from human rights organizations and parliamentary inquiries from the era documented allegations of extrajudicial actions, forced disappearances, and systemic corruption. Yet these claims rarely resulted in formal prosecutions, as officials regularly invoked state secrecy to shield sensitive operations from judicial review. Public security debates centered on the limits of sovereign authority and the role of unaccountable actors within the state apparatus. This historical backdrop explains why the objects recovered from the highway near Susurluk carried such immense political weight. In a standard criminal investigation, a cache of unregistered weapons and falsified identity documents might be treated as an isolated case of municipal corruption or local smuggling. But in 1996, Turkey's public was already highly sensitive to rumors of unofficial state alliances. The discovery of state-issued ammunition alongside an internationally sought fugitive in a vehicle driven by a senior police chief did not look like an anomaly. Instead, the physical evidence appeared to align with long-standing allegations regarding the use of extra-legal assets for state-sponsored operations. The archival record of this period shows that the Turkish state had authorized specialized units to conduct counterterrorism missions with high levels of autonomy. Because these units worked outside standard legal frameworks, they required counterfeit documentation, secure communication channels, and off-the-books financing. By placing the contents of the Mercedes into this specific historical framework, investigators and journalists could connect the physical wreckage directly to the broader mechanisms of state security. The evidence gathered at the roadside became a concrete reference point for a public debate that had previously relied on rumor and speculation. The crash made the physical components of these existing networks visible, grounding abstract allegations of state-sponsored criminality in undeniable, catalogued physical evidence. This exposure forced a shift in how the public evaluated official denials, turning political rumors into verifiable administrative questions. In the days following the collision, the domestic press took the local police ledger and placed it before the entire nation. Major daily newspapers, including Cumhuriyet and Milliyet, moved the details of the crash from the regional crime pages to the front page of every national edition. Journalists began mapping the connections between the occupants of the Mercedes, analyzing how a wanted fugitive, a member of parliament, and a senior police official came to travel together. This sustained coverage prevented the government from treating the incident as a routine highway accident. The public demand for clarity turned the physical wreckage into a symbol of unchecked power, forcing the state to address the mounting evidence. As investigators dug deeper, specific geographic patterns began to appear in the public record. The investigation repeatedly led back to Balıkesir and Kusadasi. Balıkesir, the province where the collision occurred, served as a major transit route linking the Aegean coast to the political and economic centers of Ankara and Istanbul. More significant was Kusadasi, the coastal town where Hüseyin Kocadag directed the police academy. This location was a frequent staging ground for the figures associated with the vehicle, suggesting that the networks connecting policing, politics, and the criminal underworld operated out of specific provincial hubs. These geographic repetitions indicated that the relationships inside the car were not temporary or accidental, but organized around established regional bases. By December 1996, the mounting pressure compelled an official response from the legislature. The Turkish Grand National Assembly established a formal parliamentary commission of inquiry to investigate the Susurluk affair. The investigation was no longer confined to local police stations or newspaper editorial rooms. It had become a formal matter of state. Within the parliament, the debate ceased to be about a traffic collision and became a dispute over the structure of government itself. The Parliamentary Commission began holding hearings and demanding documentation from state security organs. In the legislative chamber, opposition politicians used the physical evidence from the crash, specifically the state-issued ammunition and the forged credentials reportedly signed by Mehmet Agar, to challenge the ruling coalition. The debates moved the focus from individual criminal acts to the systemic abuse of state authority. The archive of the crash was now being read and debated in the highest chambers of government, forcing the state to defend its actions under intense public scrutiny. The proceedings of the commission soon revealed the difficulties of investigating clandestine state activities. Security agencies and ministries routinely cited state secrecy to withhold critical files and restrict access to key personnel. This friction between the legislative inquiry and the executive apparatus showed that the Susurluk crash had exposed a parallel network that the formal structures of the state were desperate to keep hidden. The institutional paper trail of the collision led directly to the highest offices of civilian law enforcement. At the center of this record was the weapons permit recovered from the body of Abdullah Katli. The document carried the signature of Interior Minister Mehmet Agar, an office holder who had previously served as the chief of the National Police Force. In the administrative record, this permit was not a private favor. It was a state-issued authorization allowing an internationally wanted fugitive to travel throughout the country with heavy weaponry. The presence of this document brought the Interior Ministry into the center of the legal proceedings as a formal entity rather than a collection of individuals. Investigators soon established that the 5.56 millimeter ammunition found in the vehicle bore the official stamp of the General Directorate of Security in Ankara. This meant the cargo in the Mercedes was not smuggled civilian contraband, but property originating from state arsenals. This physical evidence supported the mounting allegations of systematic collaboration across policing, security structures, and the criminal underworld. As these facts entered the public record, legislative and public pressure intensified. On December 8, 1996, just over 1 month after the crash, Mehmet Agar resigned his cabinet post. His resignation did not halt the inquiry, but it stripped him of his immediate ministerial immunity, allowing the Parliamentary Commission to demand his testimony. Although criminal proof remained incomplete at this stage, the systemic shift was already clear. The Turkish state was being forced to address a documented trail linking its domestic security structures to illicit activities. The political leadership of the era was also pulled into the inquiry. Under parliamentary questioning, the role of former Prime Minister Tansu Çiller came under scrutiny. While no direct physical evidence linked Çiller to the contents of the Mercedes, testimony before the commission highlighted her administration's strategic reliance on unconventional counterinsurgency tactics. Critics allege that her public statements supporting state operatives who worked in secret provided political cover for these informal networks. By mapping these administrative links, the investigation reached its sharpest point of tension. The physical evidence from the roadside had successfully bridged the gap between the criminal underworld and the offices of state power. The public debate had moved past the tragedy of a highway accident to demand a formal accounting of the parallel structures operating within the government itself. The judicial record of the Susurluk investigation remains defined by what was left unproven. While the Parliamentary Commission successfully mapped the overlapping paths of the passengers, the full scope of the relationship between state intelligence and covert operators remained shielded behind the legal boundary of state secrecy. Official reforms did follow. In the years after the collision, the state restructured gendarmerie intelligence and introduced new oversight laws for special police units. Yet these structural adjustments did not resolve the central questions raised at the roadside. The exact destination of the vehicle, the intended use of the recovered currency, and the specific targets of the weapons cache were never definitively established in a court of law. This incomplete resolution is not an oversight in the historical record, but a permanent feature of it. By invoking national security, the institutions under scrutiny preserved the very boundaries the crash threatened to dismantle. The legal proceedings eventually stalled, leaving a series of minor convictions, but no comprehensive judicial ruling on the existence of a systematic clandestine state network. Instead, the unresolved files remained archived, setting a precedent for how the state managed public exposure. These documented connections would echo decades later in subsequent political trials, demonstrating that while individual actors changed, the underlying structures of informal power remained highly resilient. The collision did not completely dismantle this parallel security apparatus. It simply stripped away its anonymity, leaving the public to weigh the documented evidence against the silence of the state. The wreckage of the Mercedes was eventually cleared, but the network it exposed survived. Today, the legacy of Susurluk persists as a blueprint of state impunity. It revealed that the line between public duty and illicit violence is often a fluid one. Until that system is dismantled, the crash remains an active warning. Join the conversation in the comments below.